They are here. Okay. Welcome, good afternoon or good evening, everybody. And it's a pleasure to start this series of webinar this year. We are hosting today the first Eden Up webinar in 2023. And the topic is well-being, students' well-being in open and distance education. And I am Inés Gil-Jaurena, and I am talking on behalf of the Eden Up, which is a section of Eden, European Distance and E-Learning Network, or European Digital Europe now. And it's a great pleasure to have with us 4 presenters who have been concerned and working about this topic about well-being and mental health, emotional aspects in open and distance education for a long time. Before the pandemic also, but it's true that since the pandemic, there is a bigger focus on these topics, particularly because during the pandemic, there were much more people and students experiencing online education or emergency remote teaching. So they were feeling or experiencing some aspects that all traditional e-learning students have lived before or for many years. And also the pandemic brought with it a lot of emotional aspects beyond the learning processes. But bringing the two together, and we have seen different works about well-being, but we wanted to invite people that have a great experience on that. So it's a great honor to have 4 speakers from three countries. And first we will have Ángeles Sánchez-Elvira, who will talk about her work on the topic, and she's a professor at the Faculty of Psychology at UNED, the Distance Education University in Spain. It's the same institution I belong to. And then we will have Kate Lister, who is working currently at Arden University in the UK. And the work she will present was based in the Open University UK on the time she was working there. And finally, we will have Liesl Scheepers and Geesje from South Africa. They are in 2 different institutions, the University of South Africa, a very, the distance university with a longer tradition in the country, and also in Varsity College in the online section. And they will be the last speakers. And we will leave some time at the end for some discussion, but please, if you have any questions, you can put that in the section about question and answer, and I will take care of that. So I want to speak more and welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Ángeles, you can start when you want. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Inés. Really, I thank you very much for this invitation to a webinar that it's in a topic that I love. Well, one of the topics I love most of all the things I've been working during my career. So also I was excited because of all the colleagues that will be here with us this afternoon. I met Kate in UNED some years ago, and I love to know that she will be there. So when when you said to me and you told me about the topic, I thought that I could give such like an overview. I'm a psychologist. That's the first thing I want to say. So my perspective always will be from the psychological side. And I will now is so important and so relevant for all of us. So I will go back to 1948 to the World Health Organization constitution, when we changed our focus on what health was, because before that we were very much focused on a biological perspective of health, and very much concerned just to physical health. And with this first step of the World Health Organization towards this conception of health as in a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being. Here we have for the first time this mention to well-being, and not just the absence of disease and infirmity. And that was the first step to change our whole conception and start working under the biopsychosocial model. then I think a second step, an interesting step, is that was the Ottawa Charter in 1986, because again, it was this focus in the health. It was not just the responsibility of the health sector, but we needed to open our minds and to go beyond healthy lifestyles, and again, move towards well-being. So again, this aspect of considering well-being and something relevant in our work. The third thing is, of course, we are all involved in the Sustainable Development Goals, and well, that was in 2015. And goal 3 is to ensure healthy lives and promote well-being for all at all ages. So we are working on that, but again, under a multidisciplinary perspective. But you see that again, the word well-being appears that as Inés has said, the prevalence of anxiety and depression and all the experience of stress during the pandemic has increased a lot this perception of well-being as a goal that we need to go for that and for everyone, and that we need to pay attention to mental health. That's another issue. So it's not just this idea of health in general that the World Health Organization has again stressed very much very recently that mental health is more, again, that this absence of just mental disease, and is an integral part of health, and again, that is a state of well-being. So again, we have the word well-being, but this is more related to, as you say, just you can see in the definition, as well, this state in which an individual realizes that he or she has the capabilities to cope with the life, with the stresses of life, and also to work productively and able to make a real contribution to the world and his or her community. But of course, this can be very difficult in many countries, in many situations for people. So we have to work on that to contribute to increase this human well-being. But the thing is that we have been starting to hear about healthy cities, healthy workplaces, healthy organizations, and of course, healthy universities. So that's our point, that's our focus. And that comes from this idea of the Ottawa Charter, the Okanagan Charter for Health Promoting Universities and Colleges, the Healthy Universities Framework in the United Kingdom, because really in UK and also in Australia, there is a lot of work being done at this respect. Well, but what is a healthy university? There are many definitions. You can see one of them here: a learning environment, because we are universities, an organizational culture that enhances health, well-being, and sustainability. And I was playing this morning with the ChatGPT, and I was asking it about what is a healthy university. And it was, well, it was nice to see that, well, what the chat says is that it prioritizes physical, mental, and social well-being, of course, but of the whole academic community, I mean, students, academics, and staff, and that healthy universities should provide resources and health support services to build this community in which we are living on, not only learning and working, but we are living in social engagement, and to foster inclusion, something that is very much related to distance education in universities, respect and safety. So, well, this is more or less a common framework. But when we come to the issue of students' well-being and you target for higher education, the development of well-being units is something we should be looking for. And I was saying before that in the UK there are many well-being units in the universities that are looking for the success of the students, looking for positive impact on retention and engagement, enhancing, of course, the student success and the academic success and their well-being, and increased satisfaction. So well-being is our central target and the central target of today's webinar. And the World Health Organization, when it defines well-being. It says that, it brings this idea of quality of life for everyone and the ability of people and societies to contribute to the world. But of course, this is a very broad definition. So as I say, I'm a psychologist. So when we talk of these issues, and in the field I've been working is in the field of positive psychology. That was one of the most recent disciplines in psychology, with Martin Seligman being the father of the positive psychology movement. And the roots are in this idea that, like in medicine, we were working very much, let's say, on the dark side, on the disease, and we should move forward the resources and the strengths of human beings and societies. So this is the background of the research we have been doing during many years in UNED. And positive psychology is bases are on positive emotions, positive traits in individuals, positive societies, communities, and so on. So from this perspective, when we talk about what positive psychology, what well-being is from the side of positive psychology, there is if we can summarize, the well-being can be defined from many different perspectives, but we can say that we have been working in two focus, although they are not independent. On the one side, the hedonic approach is to being focused in the experience of positive emotions. I mean, pleasure and joy and so on, a kind of a state of mind, and also life satisfaction. But there is other perspective, that is the eudaimonic approach, and that is related to the development of one's potential. I mean, you can go through bad times, difficult times, but if you have a purpose in your life, a sense of meaning, and resources and strengths, you can cope with that, and you can, Martin Seligman says, grow and flourish. So that's one of the models that we can work also in universities when we talk about students' well-being. And this is one of the models of flourishing in positive psychology, because this is the main goal, is to increase flourishing. That it puts together positive emotions with engagement, with positive relationships, with having purpose in life, meaning in the things we do, increase intrinsic motivations and so on. And also, of course, a part of our well-being is to accomplish the objectives we have. So that comes to the idea of positive education and the idea of healthy universities and well-being in universities. So it's to put into practice this positive psychology experience and theories and practice in academic environments. So well-being in online students. Let me just go a little bit through some of the results of the research we have been doing during many years. It's a joint mixture of the Institute of Distance Education, the chair in distance education of the university, a group of innovation you can see there, our relationship with other UNESCO chairs, going through this idea of trying to know what well-being is. But I mean, psychological well-being. So in this sense, I'm also professor in individual differences. So where we started to look through is that we thought that individual differences matter, and we wanted to know something more about profiles of students' profiles, telling us what could be the differences between those students that success and those students that might be at higher risk for dropping out and for failure and for feeling worse. We all know that one of the problems we have in distance education and higher education, of course, in general, but in distance and online education, is the high rates of dropout that we have. And the majority of our students drop out in the first semester, I mean, during the first year at university, and even before taking their first exam. So we have been doing a lot of research with our first year students. One of the conclusions is that not only our conclusions, I mean, in general, is that self-regulated learning is a framework, a good framework to understand how to promote success in online students. So it's a key factor for success and well-being. And what do we know about our students, our own students, for instance? We did a very large study many years ago, and with thousands of students, and we clearly appreciated that there were two students self-regulated learning profiles. On the one hand, those that as psychological traits, they were intrinsic motivated, they were persistent, some perseverance, and feel that they had academic competence as a trait, a psychological stable trait. But the interesting thing is that they used efficient self-regulator strategies. That's what they said. I mean, they organized the information, persistence, deep and superficial processing. I mean, both approaches to study, and fixed study patterns. That was our first study. We also found out that there were other self-regulated profile that felt low perception of academic competence when they entered in the university, pessimism, low intrinsic motivation. I mean, they studied for external maybe pressures or other external or extrinsic motivations, and low perseverance as a trait. But they also presented inefficient self-regulated learning strategies, such as poor time management, academic anxiety when they were studying or facing exams, avoidance of difficulties when they were studying, and superficial processing. So that was the first approach. In after 7 years of this cohort, you can see it was 2002, 2003. Well, those students that dropped out in the first year before taking exams, they were characterized by poor time management compared to those that had graduated in the 7 years later, that they show persistence and intrinsic motivation. So here we can find some things to take into account when we want to see how to support our students. Other approaches to this were, in our case, considering two psychological states: engagement versus burnout, in a longitudinal study where we measure students when they enter the university and then after their first exams. And we found out also very relevant issues concerning students' well-being. Again, two profiles: the burnout profile of those students with high levels of burnout profile before the first exams showed us that those students had a perception of academic burden. They have procrastinated, they have avoided difficulties and showed academic anxiety. So that again are poor self-regulated learning strategies. But they also showed dissatisfaction with their studies and negative emotions. So here we have one consequence of that regarding well-being. But we had the other side of the coin, that was in the engagement profile. And the engaged students before the exams, they said that they have enrolled in this career, these studies that they loved. They were intrinsically motivated to that, and they felt competent for their studies. They show a good self-regulated learning strategies, persistence and effort when facing study difficulties. And again, we find this consequence, positive emotions and well-being. Other study we did with clusters of first-year students show us again the same pattern of vulnerable versus no vulnerable students. That was a cluster in which those students that were vulnerable show lower levels of engagement, lower levels of positive affect and preparation to be ready for the exams. They have procrastinated more, they have higher levels of burnout and more negative affect. So finally, when we well, this is like a very quick vision of those results we have obtained with our students. This is an explanatory model in which we found out that we can talk about a positive learner suprafactor. There is characterized by harmonic passion. I mean, they love what they do in their studies, academic engagement, intrinsic motivation, personal initiative, and perceived competence. And all this is related to higher levels of efficient learning strategies and lower levels of inefficient learning strategies. And this is related, and not in a strong way, but it is related to their academic marks and also to subjective well-being. So here we can explore a little bit how things are related from the beginning till this moment in which they have received their marks and how they feel. Well, all these things made us think that universities need to enhance and to give support for students' engagement, knowing what produces students' engagement. And it's not only the personality. Of course, they are students that are engaged by themselves, I mean. But the thing is, when we found those students that have more problems to that, and this should be under a more holistic support system to increase the students' well-being, academic performance, and satisfaction. So this is the key that the student support is at the heart of the student success. So these units, working on all the units in the university, working for the student support are very necessary. We did a kind of revision with Ormond Simpson some years ago about how to develop a student support for open and distance learning. We are working this in the Empower project in the ADTU. But finally, the idea is that it's all about training. I mean, if we know what can get to a student's failure, what are these learning strategies like procrastination and so on that are not good enough, we need to train our students from the early beginning to become self-regulated and autonomous learners, and that could go hand by hand to better state in the sense of well-being. And also one thing I would like to stress is that at this moment we need more personalized support in online learning, and that comes also hand by hand with technology that can be an ally for us to give this more personalized support. Well, that was like a very quick, as I say, revision of some of the ideas, because this thing of well-being can be focused in many different ways. But of course, we have to know a little bit about how our students are and what are their needs, and of course, which are those variables that can put them at risk. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ángeles. It was impressive, this so comprehensive and research-based introduction to the topic from the psychological perspective. Thank you. I'm sure it raised a lot of people were taking notes about all the papers that they can read to get further on the topic. So if you have any question, please post that in the chat or in the question and answer section, and we will answer them at the end. And we will move now to the next presenter, Kate Lister, who will present a practice they have developed precisely to promote well-being in the students in online environments. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you very much, Inés. And thank you so much, Angela, as well. That was really interesting hearing your presentation and thinking back to when we met in UNED so many years ago, and we're excitingly talking in the cafeteria about student well-being and how important it was. So just brilliant to see how far your work's come. It's amazing to hear. So hi everybody, it's a pleasure to be here today. My name's Kate Lister. I'm a professor of education and I'm the head of academic professional development at Arden University. I also work 2 days a month as a researcher at the Open University in the UK, and that's what I'm going to be talking to you about today, a project that I did over a few years at the Open University. So Inés asked me to focus specifically on designing for well-being. So we're going to be looking at an inclusive learning design approach using student mental health vignettes. I'm going to briefly talk to you about the project in which these vignettes were created, and then I'm going to give you a little bit of time to play with the vignettes yourself, have a read through them and see what you think and whether they'd be useful for your learning design and in your context. So let's get started. So I'm going to position these vignettes and the work that we did on two different projects that took place. So first of all is the Embedding Mental Wellbeing in Distance Learning project, which looked at barriers, enablers and solutions. And that happened at the Open University. That one's now finished. And my ongoing project is Positive Digital Practices, which is a 2-year collaborative project with 6 different partners, 3 universities and 3 sector bodies, which is funded by the Office for Students here in the UK. So embedding mental wellbeing in distance learning and taking a barriers, enablers and solutions approach took place at the Open University between 2018 and 2021. And the main thing this project aimed to do is apply a social model approach to mental wellbeing. So just in case anybody here is not familiar with the social model of disability, what the social model aims to do is actually remove the focus on the individual person. Stop thinking about the individual deficits, the individual weaknesses, the individual problems. Stop positioning mental health as an individual concern and start looking holistically at the space in which the student finds themselves. Start looking at the barriers and the enablers within those spaces, those contexts, those environments, those cultures, those human support circles, and all of those things. Because if we can identify in higher education the barriers that exist for student mental well-being, then hopefully we can remove them, or we can take action to reduce them, and we can make higher education a more positive place for students to be, which is more conducive to mental well-being. So this project had 3 research questions. What barriers and enablers to mental well-being do students experience in distance learning? What solutions do students and staff perceive would reduce these barriers? And how can these solutions be embedded in distance learning? Now, this was a huge project, and I'm only going to talk to you today about a tiny, tiny bit of it. But if you would like to hear about any other parts of the project, do just get in touch. I've got my contact details at the end, and I will happily talk to you for hours about the project, because it was an awful lot of fun. It was a fantastic project. So the first thing to do then was identify these barriers and these enablers and what they were and where they resided within these contexts, these cultures and these systems in which higher education operates. So I interviewed 16 students and 5 staff, first of all, and then later on we had focus groups, and then later on surveys, and all of that led to this lovely taxonomy of barriers and enablers. I'm aware this might be a little bit small for you, and we are in Zoom, so you're not going to be able to click on it, but I will pop a link to this in the chat now, if I can get to the chat, which is going to be up here somewhere. Oh, no, it's over here. So if anybody would like to see it on a larger screen, the link has just gone in the chat for you to click on. But basically, long story short, this identified that almost anything could be a barrier or an enabler. And many times the same things could be barriers or enablers for different students experiencing them in different contexts. So you've got these green barriers and enablers over here, which were environmental ones. And there could be barriers within spaces, like the physical spaces, the social media spaces, the isolation within these spaces. There could be people-related barriers or enablers. You know, we all know that people can be fantastic for our mental health, or they can be really bad for our mental health, depending who they are and what your relationship is with them. There were barriers in university systems, comms, and things like this. I'm sure we can all relate to that. And there were barriers in life, you know, life circumstances and backgrounds and things like this. These purple ones here, these are the skills related barriers and enablers. So generally lack of skills, very much as Ángeles has just said, you know, lack of skills or lack of confidence in skills could be a huge barrier to confidence and sense of well-being and sense of strong identity in study, particularly in distance learning. So these could be social skills, they could be self-management skills, like managing your mental health, managing your sense of identity. And they could also be study skills, very much as Ángeles has just said. Actually, it's nice that our research is supporting each other, Ángeles. It's almost as if we planned it. So yes, if the students didn't have confidence in their study skills, or if they didn't have the study skills, these could be a real barrier. However, if you track this across the taxonomy, once they started gaining confidence in these skills and started recognizing that they were growing these skills, that was a huge enabler to positive mental well-being in study. And then the final third here is the brown one, which is the study-related barriers and enablers. So these resided in the curriculum. So in terms of the curriculum content itself could be very challenging for students and distressing. The activities, things like group work, could be extreme barriers to mental health. And the design of the curriculum, if it was dull and hard to engage with, that could be really difficult for students. The tuition they got, the nature of the tutorials, their relationship with the tutor, and the level of support and flexibility they had could easily be very positive or very negative for their mental health. And finally, of course, assessment could be a huge barrier or enabler to mental well-being. So that could be the feedback and the scores, like the grades that they got. If they were good, fantastic. But if they weren't, or if they were afraid of them as well, that could be a huge barrier as well. The type of assessment, so exams, presentations, are automatically a lot more stressful for students than other types of assessments. The design of the assessment, like how well worded it is, how clear the instruction is, it was amazing the impact on students' mental health of having an unclear instruction in a high stakes assessment. It would send them into a panic for weeks and have a serious impact on them. And then finally, deadlines and extensions. Some students love deadlines, some hate them. Similarly with extensions, some students were terrified of extensions, whereas for some students, they were a lifeline. So it was very much dependent on the student, what they experienced it when. So as part of this work, as well as capturing this kind of larger scale data, I also captured stories, and I created 10 vignettes, student vignettes, which is the thing that I wanted to share with you today. These vignettes were basically student stories. So these are anonymous. So the pictures are not the real pictures of the students. The names are anonymous. But many of the actual words, many of the stories and the experiences are real, but they are jigsawed together so that no student is identifiable through these. And just looking at the time, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pop the link to these in the chat, and I'm going to give you 3 minutes just to have a play with them, have a look at them, and read one of the vignettes. Just choose one which appeals to you and then read through it. I do only have them in English. I will happily translate them to other languages. If anyone would be interested in collaborating on that, I would absolutely love to. But for the moment, they're just in English. But I'm going to pop the link to them in the chat for you. If I can get it, copy link. Here we go, coming into the chat now. And I'm going to go quiet for 3 minutes and just let you choose one of those vignettes and read through it to yourself and think about how this might influence your learning design or practice in your institution. So 3 minutes. Okay, everybody, I'm afraid your 3 minutes are up. I wish I had more time. And also, I've just realized I owe you an apology, because normally if I was doing this, with students, I would actually do a trigger warning at the beginning of sharing those vignettes with you, because there is some potentially distressing content in there. And I'm really sorry I forgot to do that. So there was me not practicing what I preach in this case. So apologies for that. I hope you found those useful. Feel free to continue to access them and continue to read them in your own time. And hopefully they will give you some ideas for ways in which you can influence your own learning design in your own institutions. I've got about 2 more minutes left for presentation, so I'm just going to tell you a little bit about what happened after we used these vignettes and how we used them in the Open University. So, having created those vignettes with student stories, this was just before COVID. This was late 2019 and early 2020. I held focus groups with staff and students in which we looked at these vignettes together, and we tried to identify some solutions to the barriers and some considerations for learning design, some things that we could actually do within our modules at the Open University that would support student mental well-being. We had 107 staff and 9 students in the end. It would have been more students, but we got hit with COVID, which meant a lot of we had ended up having one big online session. This was very, very early days when we weren't used to really being online as much as we are now. But we got an awful lot of interaction. And here's one of the pictures of one of the last big events before COVID. And we came up with a lot of ideas for solutions. I won't go through all of these because we won't have time, but again, I can share the link, I can give you the link to them so you can read them in your own areas. But in this little area here, this little brown box here, which is the sort of learning and study related considerations and solutions, we were talking about inclusive curriculum and design, confidence boosting activities, engaging in inclusive design, early access to content, pre-module preparation, flexibility in activities, technology strategies, timetabling breaks for the students so that they have time to recover and to kind of be gaining these skills, inclusive tutorial practice, tutor support, flexible deadlines, alternative assessments, dialogic feedback practice, clear assessment guidance, fail and retake support. We also came up with a load of solutions around skills-based support, how we could be supporting students to develop these skills. So a load of ideas around environments and comms and things like this, and a load of student support related ideas as well, which I won't go through now. But again, if you'd like to hear more about these or discuss any of them, we can pick up after the event today. So the OU project finished in 2021 and has now fed into a larger project, happily, hooray, externally funded, woohoo, which is a 2-year collaborative project funded by the Office for Students, and it's broader than just distance students now. We're looking at part-time distance and commuter students, so students who commute to their university and are not located on campus. It's a big project with the Open University, University of Bradford and Warwick, and then 3 sector bodies, Geesje, Student Minds, and the University Mental Health Advisor Network in the UK. And over the last year, we have created a huge suite of resources that people can use in their learning design. They're free, please use them. I'm going to pop the link in the chat. Please feel free to explore them. I would love to talk to you more about how you can use them, or give you ideas, or listen to your ideas, or anything like this. And I'm also going to pop the link in the chat for the vignettes and the taxonomy. And my time is now up. So I'll just say thank you so much for listening. It's been a real pleasure to talk to you today.
Thank you very much, Kate, and congratulations for having the opportunity to continue with this work, now with a funded project with other institutions also. And I personally think these vignettes are really powerful tool to humanize also, and to let us know all the diversity of students we can have at distance education institutions. And just one thing, that this study was published in Open Praxis. I will share you the link to the full paper. And now the next presenters will also present a research that they will publish in Open Praxis and will be published tomorrow. So we don't have the link yet, but you can check the website tomorrow if you want to read that, that I'm sure you will want to. So we now have 2 presenters from South Africa, Liesl and Geesje. And they will be the last presenters. And same as before, if you have any question, please put them in the chat or in the question and answer. We will answer them at the end. Thank you. You can start.
Thank you. I'm just going to share my screen.
Good afternoon, all from my side, while Liesl is sharing the screen. Firstly, thank you so much, Ángeles and Kate, for wonderful talks about your research and work that you do in student well-being. I think this is such an important topic. We tend to forget our work in curriculum studies, and we tend to focus so much on curriculum sometimes that we forget these important aspects of student well-being. And I think before I start, I would like also to thank Inés for the kind invitation. Thank you. It's really an honor to be part of this Eden NAP webinar, and we look forward to share with us our research. So Liesl, if you can share with us.
Okay, can you see my screen? Can you see the screen?
Not yet.
Okay. Sorry. Okay.
There you go.
All right. I'm just going to put it into slideshow mode. Is that right?
Great.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
So I think Inés introduced us briefly. So my name is Geesje van der Berg. I'm a professor in the Department of Curriculum and Instructional Studies at the University of South Africa. And since I did my doctorate in 2005, I lecture and I research in theory and practice of open distance learning, or ODL. So my research mainly involves student support and student interaction in ODL context. So as Inés also said, with me then is Liesl Scheepers, and she's the manager of online teaching and learning at the Independent Institute of Education's Varsity College, also in South Africa. And she's also a current PhD student at the University of South Africa. And her research focuses on emotional wellness, teacher efficacy, and burnout in ODL. So our presentation this afternoon is mainly based on Liesl's master's study. So we'll start with a brief introduction and the background, and then I will hand over to her to talk about the study. So the study we report on lies close to our hearts as we both work with online students on a daily basis. Although our contexts are different, we are aware of the importance of students' emotional well-being, especially in online environments where they can easily feel lonely and isolated. So emotional well-being, next slide, Liesl, please. Thank you. Emotional well-being is defined by authors such as Riemann and others as, and I quote, the awareness of feelings and their expression in a healthy manner with the stability of mood, sense of self, positive attitude toward others, and the ability to cope with stress. So against this background, the South African private higher education institution in the study we report on introduced the role of a program success tutor, or a PST, to look after the emotional well-being of its students when it launched its ODL model in 2016. So the PST was created for the sole purpose of providing an emotionally support online presence to address the sense of disconnect and feelings of isolation students often report experiencing. So the PST role is designed to focus on relationship building, specifically at the end of each semester, but also during the course of the academic year. PST engagement supplements then the academic support offered by the online facilitator for each module or course. The PST role also mandates the monitoring of student engagement via the institution's learning management system and following up on potentially at-risk students. So in 2020, the world was introduced with the coronavirus, sorry, as we all know. So a year later, then in 2021, there was an opportunity to reflect on the PST role and its impact on students' learning journeys during this challenging time. The aim of this study then was to better understand the value that students place on such a support mechanism and how these insights may be used to inform the development of ODL models to promote increased student retention and academic success in times of relative calm, but also, of course, during times of crisis. So Liesl will now proceed by briefly sharing the theoretical framework, conceptual framework that underpinned our study, and then the methodology and the findings in conclusion. So over to you, Liesl.
Thank you so much, Geesje, and thank you very much for inviting us to be here this evening. So in terms of the conceptual framework that we looked at, we turned specifically to the work of COP in order to understand non-academic affective support as it exists in an online learning environment. And you can see non-academic activities are presumed to encourage success, but are not necessarily overtly academic and can occur formally within a class setting or even informally through a range of mediators. I see the slide's a little bit big, but so in terms of the theoretical framework, we looked at the work of Garrison, Anderson, and Archer and their community of inquiry model. So collectively, social presence, teaching presence, and cognitive presence are recognized as crucial in a community of inquiry, but it was social presence that facilitates the students being able to perceive of and perceiving others as real people within a learning environment. So for this explorative case study, we used an explorative case study because it is suited to facilitate an intensive study of a single unit for the purpose of understanding a larger class or similar units. In our study, ODL students who were registered with the institution during 2020 and 2021, as well as those who were on the 2020 graduation list, were invited to participate. Right, this slide provides a brief summary of our approach, and I apologize, it looks like the top line is missing, but essentially there were 34 students who participated in the study. 30 of these students were able to share their experiences of the PST role during the pandemic, and they provided the sample for the study. And then we had 4 students who had completed their studies prior to 2019, and they formed the quota. So in other words, these were students who were able to comment on the PST support as they had experienced it, shall we say, during a time of relative calm. We also conducted 5 focus groups and 12 one-on-one semi-structured interviews. These were all conducted online, and they were obviously recorded with the permission of the participants. For the analysis of the data, we used the 6-phase thematic analysis model of Braun and Clark. And during the connection and the analysis of the data, 3 sub-themes emerged to support our main theme of determining the value of affective support during a time of crisis. So I'm going to briefly take you through these. So sub-theme 1 was the effect of the pandemic on participants' studies. Sub-theme 2 were opposing views of the affective PST support. And sub-theme 3 was reflecting on the role of the PST since the pandemic. So in summary, for sub-theme 1, which was the effect of the pandemic on participant studies, we had 14 students that indicated that the lockdown regulations had actually benefited their studies. 11 of them said that the stresses associated with the pandemic had had a negative effect on their studies. And 5 shared that their studies had remained pretty much on track, but they did confess to sometimes feeling overwhelmed by the realities of the pandemic. And just to note that the quota group here were not included, obviously, because they had completed their studies prior to the pandemic. So sub-theme 2 were the opposing views of the affective PST support. And some students saw the need for isolation almost as a benefit, and they used this opportunity to manage their own learning with no real interest in PST support. And speaking to some of these students, they said, or they referred to the PST presence as nice but not necessary. Others, however, relied far more intensely on the affective support provided during this time. As one student said, she stuck with me. She said to me that everything was going to be fine. She helped me with everything. And I mean, that's all you need, just someone to check in to say that it's going to be okay. The question for us then remained, did those participants who had an established relationship with their PST prior to 2020 experience the support they received during the pandemic any differently? And this gave rise to subtheme 3, sorry. And from the data, we saw that there did not appear to be any significant difference in the nature of the PST support that was provided prior to and then during the pandemic. However, the importance that students placed on that support did significantly change for some during a time of crisis. And we concluded then that the value placed on the PST support was clearly context driven. So while some students seemed to just take the pandemic and the subsequent lockdown in their stride, there were others that were very clearly overwhelmed with what was going on, and they relied far more heavily on the contact that was provided by their PST. So in conclusion, although students' dependence on this affective support provided by the PST varied, there was certainly a recognition that feeling emotionally supported played a key role in them experiencing a more meaningful connection to their online learning communities as well as to the institution. And we believe that this notion of being part of a community, something that's larger than themselves, has a critical role to play in the entire student learning journey, and then ultimately in their potential to achieve academic success. So thank you for your time and this opportunity to engage.
Well, thank you very, very much, both of you, for sharing your work, your study. We have some time for questions. So if you have some questions, please put them in the chat or in the question and answer section. At the moment, we have 2 questions from one person. And I think it was posted after Ángeles' presentation, but I don't know if that's only addressed to her. And it says, is there any relation between the level of students' knowledge and skills in digital literacy and student well-being?
Yeah, of course. There are also many researchers that are doing these studies about how to connect the skills and in the digital environment and how students feel, because all of this is connected. I mean, if you don't feel competent enough, it's not just to be competent in mathematics or in physics or whatever you are going to study. It's also these things, and how are you feeling in terms of competency regarding the usage and the things you need to, the tools you need to control when you are in an online environment. That's why we do, you know very well, Inés, too, that we do a lot of effort in our university to pay attention to our newest students. So we have been working very much since many years ago. We also think that working and being with them in communities is very important. So that's why we open these virtual induction communities every year for our new students, just to try to get them involved in the university since the early beginning, and trying to get acquaintance and to the others, and to get I mean to get them into the platform and all those things, because these are very important, and this takes place before the real course begins. So of course, I mean, that is related to well-being, and I love this wheel of Kate. I have to pay very much attention to that, because that's the holistic approach. All the things you need, because it's not just that I was talking about the things we have to take care of and to know about the personality, but the thing is also, what do we do as institutions, as teachers, as tutors, to get them, you know, engaged and not to feel burnout and all these things. We have been doing research and we see that they are barriers for our students. So of course.
Thank you very much, Ángeles. We have another question. It says, what's the difference between well-being and welfare in the open and distance learning context? I don't know if it is addressed to any of you. So if any wants to reply, I really don't get very much the what the question is about, but maybe you have a clearer idea.
I will.
Well-being and welfare. Yeah.
English.
Oh, no,
English is clear. English is speaking, please.
So I'm going to come up with the typical academic answer, which is it completely and utterly depends. It depends on your context. It's really interesting because I've just been doing a piece of work that was funded by the QAA in the UK, which is the Quality Assurance Agency, around definitions and how important it is that we create solid definitions of things like mental well-being, mental health. Mental well-being and mental health are fairly well defined, but embedding, for example, we talk about in the UK a lot about embedding mental health and holistic approaches to mental health and university-wide whole institution approaches to mental health. And we don't really define what this means. Similarly, with your question around welfare and those lines between mental health and mental well-being, you'll have an idea what they mean. I'll have a different idea what they mean. Somebody who works in student support will have a different idea what they mean. If you approach it from a legal perspective, they have different legal ramifications. They'll have different student support ramifications. So my very fluffy academic answer here is it completely depends on your own context. And it is really important to identify your own definitions of these key terms, and to make sure that your definitions are shared with your institution, because the piece of work I've just been doing, which was around defining embedding mental well-being, found that lots of people had different perceptions of what embedding meant, but they all thought that everybody else felt the same as they did. So it was very, very confusing. Some people thought if something is embedded, it has to be completely invisible so that nobody can see it at all. And it's just there inherent within the walls and within the culture and the context. Whereas other people thought that if something is embedded, it's obvious, it's a clear commitment, a clear university commitment. And so it has to be obvious, it has to be shown, it has to be on display. And that's just an example of how people have very different ideas of what something actually means, and they assume that everybody shares their same definition. So yes, that would be my answer. Create your own definitions.
Thank you, Dave. Would you like to add something about this? Well, I don't see any other question. Maybe I missed something, but I'm really happy with all your presentations. I think they really complement each other, and we had a more psychological approach, then a more social and holistic approach, but also different experiences and how different institutions find different solutions. And we have the welcome program for new students and training to newcomers that Ángeles said in my university. We have a professional development, particularly, as Kate said, I'm using this very innovative tool, the vignettes, and to lead, and I really feel as a professor myself that I really need to know my students. So these vignettes are really a visual and very clear tool to know about it, especially about the diversity of learners, that we sometimes miss that. And we see number of students, especially in our big universities, that we have hundreds of students, but then this helps you to see that we have very, very different profiles, and each one with their needs. And I think the colleagues from South Africa, you're very lucky with this more personal program, the support, affective support for students, which is really, I think, also unique, or I don't know, other programs like that in distance education, which is also depends a lot of the number of students, I guess. But so it's very interesting to see all these different solutions, and especially to see this concern about these aspects of well-being. And I'm very happy to see that we have about 100 people following us today live, and this session will be recorded and will be available at the Eden website and YouTube. So I hope there will be other people listening to us in the future. And well, there are a lot of messages of thanking and congratulations to all of you, and also for your availability to being contacted in the future if they want to know more, because of course we had a very limited time, but we will finish on time. That's great. So thank you also for that. But of course, this opens a lot of topics, and it's great to know that you are still working on that and you are available for further questions. And we had people from many different places. They introduce each other in the chat, so that's also very nice to see. And I would like to announce also the next webinar that will be in February 15, so in 2 weeks at 1 in the afternoon, so a bit earlier than usual, and it will be about ChatGPT and the artificial intelligence essays. Who will write the ending? That is the topic. So it's very timely webinar also as this one. So you are all invited to join. And before closing, I would like to leave you, if you want to add something to close, feel free to do so. If you don't want to add anything, don't feel obliged. But if you want to close with something, you can do that. So, and my great thanks to all the panelists and all the attendants.
Thank you very much again, Inés, because I really think it's a very good topic and something that it's very much important right now. It's the time, I think, to see that we can work on well-being and well in other areas, so also in universities. And this idea of healthy universities, I think it is very powerful, not only for a student.
Thank you so much. Yeah, also from our side, it's just wonderful to learn from different contexts. Thank you so much, Inés, and everybody. It was a great event. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody. It's been a pleasure. And I think together we all have the power to make higher education a much more inclusive and positive and lovely space to be in for everybody, as Ángeles was saying, staff and students. Everybody's welcome here.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, and the best for you all.